Rancher risked his life to save two Apache boys, but what their mother brought next day changed everything. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun was bleeding out across the desert, turning the sky a sick shade of red. Wind pushed through the canyons like breath from something dying. Luke Carver rode slow, saddle heavy with flour and salt, the kind of supplies that said he meant to get home before dark. But the land felt wrong tonight. No birds, no rustle of grass. Just a silence too clean to trust. Then came the sound, faint, strange, a cry tangled in the hiss of wind. Luke pulled the reins, squinting into the distance. Nothing moved. Just heat, dust, and the shimmer of a storm crawling closer from the west. He waited, listening. Maybe it was an animal caught in a snare. Maybe the wind playing tricks. But then it came again, higher, thinner, a sound no coyote ever made. A child's cry. He lowered his hat against the glare. "Ain't no sound out here but ghosts," he muttered. The cry answered. Luke sighed, throat dry. Damn it! He swung down from the saddle, boots sinking into the loose sand. The air was thick, the color of copper and smoke. He followed the sound toward a dry wash, each step dragging as the wind rose behind him. Then he saw them. Two small shapes half buried near a tumble of rock, still as death. He dropped to a knee, brushing sand from their faces. Apache boys, skin cracked, lips split, one clutching the snapped shaft of an arrow like it could still protect him. Luke's gut twisted. He looked back toward his horse, toward the open trail that led home, clean and easy. Every story he'd ever heard about helping Apaches came crawling up his spine. Settlers shot in their fields. Horses taken. Bonds burned. His wife's voice drifted from memory. "Don't bring trouble home, Luke. Not again." But trouble was already breathing at his feet. He checked for a pulse. The older boy's skin burned under his fingers, fever high. The younger one was barely breathing at all. Luke reached for his canteen, tilted a trickle of water against the cracked lips. The child coughed once, weak but alive. Luke stared out across the endless desert. He could ride away. No one would ever know. Then he remembered the small grave behind his barn, the one with the crooked cross that used to bear his son's name before the wind wore it away. The way the boy had gasped for breath, the same way these two were gasping now. His voice came out rough. "All right, boys. Reckon we ain't leaving nobody to the buzzards." He lifted the older child first, then the smaller, wrapping them both in his saddle blanket. His horse shifted under the weight, uneasy. The first gust of sand stung his eyes, carried the smell of rain and something older, like iron and smoke. A raven landed on a nearby rock, black feathers glossy in the dying light. It watched him, head tilting slow, too knowing. Luke stared back. "Go on," he muttered. "Ain't your meal tonight." He swung into the saddle, pulling the brim of his hat low. Lightning licked across the horizon and thunder rolled behind it, distant but coming fast. He gave the reins a flick. "Hang on, boys," he whispered. "We're riding through." They moved north toward the ridges. Sand cut at his face like blades. The boys didn't stir. Every few breaths, Luke looked down, searching for signs of life. Still breathing. Barely. Then the hair rose on the back of his neck. High on the ridge, against the lightning flash, a figure stood. Tall, motionless, watching. Luke blinked, squinting through the dust. But when the sky went dark again, the ridge was empty. He pressed his heels to the horse's sides. "Let's move." Behind him, thunder broke open the sky and the desert vanished in rain. The raven lifted off, circling once before following them into the storm, silent as a shadow. "Keep breathing, boy, come on. Just breathe." Luke Carver's voice was barely more than a whisper, lost in the roar of the storm. Rain hammered his hat brim, streaming down his coat as the horse fought the rising wind. Two small bodies hung over the saddle in front of him, dead weight against the pounding rhythm of hooves. The desert was gone, swallowed by night and dust and rain. He could feel the boy's heat through his coat.
"Fever bad kind."
Every jolt of the horse drew a weak moan from one of them, then silence again. Lightning cracked above, lighting the canyon walls in flashes that vanished too quick to trust. Luke's hands were numb on the reins. He'd been riding for hours, and every mile felt heavier. The wind shrieked through the gullies like something alive, dragging the sand into his eyes and mouth. Somewhere behind the noise, the old warnings came whispering back, voices of neighbors and ranch hands long gone. Help an Apache, and you'll bring their ghosts onto your land. They don't thank you, Carver. They mark you. He clenched his jaw. Then let 'em mark me, he muttered. The horse stumbled, nearly throwing him. He caught himself, gasping. One of the boys coughed hard, blood splattering against Luke's sleeve, dark against the wet leather. He looked around, searching through the storm, until he spotted a break in the rock, a low overhang, half hidden by scrub. Shelter. He pulled the horse in, half dragging the boys under the ledge. The rain softened once they were inside, replaced by the sound of dripping water and the wheeze of the storm outside. He struck a match, hands shaking, and a weak flame caught the edge of his lantern. The light was small, but it pushed the dark back just enough. He laid the boys side by side on his bedroll. Their faces were raw with sun and grit. The older one's arm was burned bad, blackened skin from a blast or fire. Luke cut the sleeve open and poured a trickle of water over it. The boy didn't move. He worked clumsily, wrapping the wound with a strip torn from his own shirt. The younger boy stirred, whispering something faint and fast in Apache. Luke didn't understand a word, but the tone was clear. Fear. The child's fingers clutched a small pouch at his chest. Luke hesitated, then loosened it gently from his hand to keep it from the wet. Inside were two things, a hawk feather and a shard of obsidian, dark as the night outside. He didn't know what they meant, but he knew better than to toss them aside. "Don't worry," he murmured, slipping the pouch into his pocket. "Ain't gonna take nothing from you. Just keeping it safe till morning." He poured a few drops of his last water on their lips. "I ain't your kin," he said softly, voice breaking in the stillness, "but I'll get you through this night." The firelight flickered across the rock walls, painting shadows that moved like ghosts. He leaned back, exhaustion pressing down like a weight. The wind outside rose and fell, carrying distant echoes. Maybe thunder, maybe something else. Luke glanced toward the mouth of the cave. For a heartbeat he saw it, a faint glint of metal on the ridge above, just where the lightning flashed. Then nothing. His hand moved to the rifle by his side. Could just be the storm, he told himself. But he kept the rifle close anyway. The younger boy whimpered again, turning his face toward Luke. There was a streak of blood under his nose. The older one's breathing had grown shallow, chest barely moving. Luke pressed a hand to his ribs. "Stay with me, son," he said, shaking him gently. "You hear me?" "You hang on." The boy didn't answer. Only the sound of rain dripping from the rocks. Luke leaned closer, panic rising in his throat. He pressed an ear to the boy's chest. "Nothing. Come on," he hissed, pounding his hand once, twice against the child's sternum. "Don't you do this." Outside, thunder rolled, tearing the sky apart. The lantern flame flickered hard, then steadied. For a second, it looked like the boy might breathe again, a twitch, a gasp. But it faded as fast as it came. Luke sat there frozen, hand on the child's chest, as the wind screamed through the canyon mouth. Then lightning struck just beyond the ridge, and the cave filled with blinding white. In that flash, he saw it, a silhouette against the rain, tall and still, watching from the ridge above. When the light vanished, the figure was gone. Luke's whisper was lost in the thunder. "God help me. What have I brought on my land? Don't you die on me, boy." Luke's hand slammed against the child's chest, again and again, his breath coming ragged through the cold dawn air. The storm had passed, but its fury still echoed in the sky, thunder rolling off somewhere beyond the ridges, like a dying drum. The younger boy lay limp beside them, still as the rocks, while Luke fought to pull the older one back from whatever shadow had taken him. "Come on," he whispered. "You're tougher than this." The silence stretched thin, then a gasp. Just one, but it was enough. The boy's chest rose shallowly, a trembling breath scraping out like a match being struck in the dark. Luke sagged back, shaking, rainwater and sweat mixing on his face. He sat there for a long time, just listening, to the breathing, to the wind finally gone quiet, to the earth steaming as the sun broke over the canyon edge. The desert smelled of dust and wet sage. It felt like the whole world had been scrubbed raw. For the first time since sunset, Luke let himself look around. The sky was bruised purple and gold. Pools of water shimmered in the sand. He should have felt peace, but something deep inside twisted instead. Then he saw them, tracks in the soft ground, leading from the ridge down toward the wash. Hoofprints, fresh. Not his. He rose slow, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved, but he could feel it. Eyes out there, watching, measuring, the kind of quiet that doesn't belong to nature. He turned back to the boys, tucking the blanket tighter around their shoulders. "If they're out there, boys," he murmured, "I reckon they'll come for you. Or me." He loaded them carefully onto the horse, one in front, one behind, then swung into the saddle. His muscles screamed from the long night, but he didn't look back toward the storm. He rode north toward home. The sun climbed higher as he crested the ridge. Below lay his ranch, a squat wooden house, smoke curling from the chimney, fences stretching out in crooked lines like ribs. A windmill turned lazy in the breeze. It looked small against the endless plain, fragile almost. Cole was already outside, feeding the chickens. When he saw Luke riding in, his hand froze mid-throw. "What in hell?" Luke dismounted slow, lifting the blanket so Cole could see. The ranch hand's eyes went wide, then hard. "Apache." Luke nodded once. "Found him half dead in the wash." "Found him?" Cole spat, dropping the bucket. "You brought him here?"
Luke, are you out of your damn mind?
"You bring them here, you bring war." Luke didn't flinch. "War's already out there. I just ain't turning my back on it." Cole shook his head, pacing, hands clenching and unclenching. "You think they won't come for 'em? You think their kin won't track right to your door? Lord Almighty, you'll get us both killed." Luke looked toward the horizon, where the wind bent the dry grass into silver waves. "Then let war find me with clean hands." For a moment, neither man spoke. Only the wind moved, whispering through the fence posts, rattling the gate. Cole's anger broke into something else then. Fear, maybe pity. "You always had a soft spot, Luke. Gonna cost you one day." Luke gave a tired half-smile. "Reckon it already has." He lifted the boys down and carried them toward the house. Cole didn't help, just stood there, eyes darting toward the ridges. Luke laid the children near the hearth, the small fire inside warming their pale faces. The younger one stirred, murmuring something in a tongue Luke couldn't understand. "Rest easy, son," Luke said quietly. "You're safe now." But the word safe sounded wrong the moment it left his mouth. He walked to the window, peering out at the vast, empty land. The morning light hit the far ridge, and there, at the very top, something caught the sun, a spear point. Tied to it, a single feather, dark, glinting with dew. It fluttered once, slow and deliberate, like a signal meant only for him. Luke's hand tightened around the window frame. He didn't move, didn't breathe. Somewhere beyond that ridge, someone was watching. Someone who already knew where those boys had gone. And as the wind rose again, carrying that feather's whisper down the valley, Luke Carver understood. This wasn't the end of his trouble. It was the beginning. "Put pressure there," Luke said quietly. Martha's hands trembled as she pressed the torn bedsheet against the boy's side. Blood had seeped through 2 layers already, but the child's breathing had steadied, thin, but steady. The house smelled of iron and heat. Outside, the sun baked the dirt yard until it shimmered like a mirage. Luke dipped a rag in the water basin, wrung it out, and wiped sweat from the younger boy's brow. The child murmured something in Apache, voice cracked, eyes flicking toward the window. He kept pointing toward the ridge. Luke followed his gaze, uneasy. "What's he saying?" Martha whispered. "Don't know," Luke muttered. "But he ain't talking to us." The horses outside gave a sudden snort, then another, a sound sharp enough to cut through the still air. The chickens went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Martha straightened, eyes darting toward the window. "Luke!" He'd already moved to the door, rifle in hand. The land outside looked molten, heat rising in waves, distorting the horizon. But through it, shapes, moving, 3 riders. They came slow, like ghosts from the dust. Faces painted in streaks of black and gray, feathers tied in their hair. The lead rider carried a staff crowned with raven feathers that caught the light with each step of his horse. Luke felt his pulse tighten. Raven feathers meant death rites. Behind him, Cole's boots thudded on the porch boards. "They ain't here for talk," he growled, cocking the rifle. Luke didn't answer right away. The riders stopped about 30 yards out, motionless, the air between them humming with something ancient and dangerous. Then Luke said, "Lo, then they'll see we're not either." He stepped out onto the porch. The wood creaked under his weight. His rifle stayed low, barrel aimed at the ground. The Apache leader dismounted first. He was older, lines cut deep into his face, eyes steady as stone. He raised one hand, palm open, not in threat but in greeting. His lips moved, words slow and rhythmic, carried faintly on the wind. "A prayer, maybe, or a warning," Cole hissed. "Don't you trust that? You lower that rifle, you'll regret it." Luke didn't reply. His eyes stayed on the man's gesture, the calm in it. The leader's gaze shifted past Luke, through the open door, toward the two boys lying inside. A cry tore from one of the other riders. He swung down, stumbling forward, voice breaking as he saw the wounded children. A father's cry, raw, animal. He dropped to his knees in the dirt. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Luke felt something twist in his chest. He understood that sound. Cole raised his rifle again, nerves sparking. "Luke, we got to—" Luke lifted a hand. "No." He walked forward, slow, unarmed now. Dust kicked up around his boots. The Apache elder watched him, every movement precise, unreadable. When Luke stopped a few paces away, he said softly, "They live." For now, the words hung heavy. The father looked up, tears streaking the paint on his face. The elder nodded once, solemn, respectful. For a long time, no one spoke. Just the steady creak of the windmill turning, the horses breathing, the heat pressing down. Then the elder stepped closer, touching his chest. His hand moved outward, pointing straight to Luke. His voice came low, deep as thunder. One word, debt. Luke's throat tightened. He didn't know if it was a warning or a promise. The elder turned, mounted his horse, and the three riders wheeled away. Their silhouettes blurred back into the heat, swallowed by distance and light. Martha came to stand beside Luke. What did he say? Luke's eyes stayed on the ridge. Said I owe him, or he owes me. Maybe both, Cole swore under his breath. You just painted a target on this whole ranch. Luke didn't argue. He just watched the dust trail fade. The wind rose again, carrying the faint sound of a raven's call from far off. It echoed over the land like a memory, half warning, half farewell. When Luke finally turned back toward the house, Martha's eyes followed him with quiet fear. The two boys slept inside, breathing shallow, unaware of the fire that had just been lit between two worlds. Luke paused on the porch and looked once more toward the empty ridge. The sunlight caught on something glinting near the horizon, metal maybe, or eyes. Whatever it was watching. And Luke Carver knew, deep down, that mercy had just bought him a debt the desert never forgets. You saved what is mine. The words came soft through the doorway, carried on the hush between night and dawn. Luke Carver froze. His hand hovered near the lantern, flame trembling in the glass. Outside, the desert wind shifted like breath across old bones. The boys slept on the cot, fever cooling, wounds bandaged in torn linen. For the first time in days, there was peace inside the house. But that voice, it didn't belong to peace. He turned slowly. A woman stood framed by moonlight, wrapped in deerskin, a white hawk perched silent on her arm. The bird's eyes glowed pale and alive. Dust from the trail hung around her like smoke. Luke said nothing. His chest felt hollow, as if the night itself waited for his words. The woman stepped forward, the floor creaking under her boots. Her face was painted in thin streaks of ash and clay. Time and wind had carved their stories into her skin. But her eyes carried something older, not hate, not mercy, something that saw straight through him. The hawk let out a single breath of sound, low and sharp. The younger boy stirred, whispering a word in Apache, then fell silent again. The woman's gaze softened. She knelt beside them, pressing her hand gently against each boy's chest. She murmured something Luke didn't understand, a song, a prayer, maybe both. He tried to speak, his throat dry. "You there, kin?" She looked up. "Mother." The word hit like a gust of cold wind. Luke took a half-step back. Every instinct told him to be cautious, to guard what was his. But she didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, she laid her hawk on the table, wrapped her shawl tighter, and untied a small bundle from her shoulder. "You saved what is mine," she said again, voice low, even. "Now I return what is yours," Luke frowned. "Ain't got nothing of mine out there." She opened the bundle. Inside was something small, wrapped in doeskin, worn smooth by time. She peeled back the cover. A wooden toy horse. Luke's breath caught. The thing looked impossibly familiar. The rough edges, the burned marks near the legs. He remembered carving it years ago, late one winter, for a little boy who'd never seen snow. His boy, the one they buried after the barn fire. His voice broke. Where'd you get that?" The woman set it gently on the table between them. "Fire took it. Smoke carried it. My people found it near the canyon creek. We kept it. Said it carried a spirit, a child searching for home." She looked at him with quiet certainty. "We bring it back now." "For your mercy." Luke's knees felt weak. He sat down hard, staring at the tiny horse as if it might speak. Outside, the wind had gone still. The only sound was the ticking of the lantern and the slow breathing of sleeping boys. He whispered, "I didn't do it for this." "I know," she said. "That's why it returns." Her hawk shifted, wings brushing the air. Feathers caught the moonlight, scattering pale reflections across the walls. The woman rose, every movement deliberate, graceful, like part of the land itself. Luke wanted to ask her to stay, to explain, to tell him what this meant. But he couldn't. Words didn't belong to this kind of silence. The woman turned toward the door. "They will live," she said softly. "And so will you." The hawk gave a sharp cry, sudden and pure. It leapt from her arm, slicing through the night. The ranch filled with the rush of wings as it rose higher, circling above the roofline. Luke stepped to the doorway, eyes following its white shape against the paling sky. Dawn was pushing at the horizon, thin light bleeding into the desert. When he looked back, the woman was gone. Only footprints in the dust, leading toward the ridge. He stood there a long time, the toy horse clenched in his hand, the faint cry of the hawk fading into morning. For the first time in years, Luke Carver felt something stir inside him. Not peace, not sorrow, but the fragile weight of understanding behind him. One of the boys coughed, calling faintly in his sleep. "Nantan." Luke turned. Shadows rippled across the floor, and outside on the ridge, another shape moved. Tall, silent, watching. "Wind's changin'," Luke said quietly. The words barely left his lips before the morning took them, soft, gold, and endless. The desert lay still, washed clean by dawn. Dust sparkled in the low light, and the air smelled of sage after a long night of silence. The Apache woman stood near her horse, her sons beside her, both wrapped in woven blankets that caught the sun like fire on water. Luke Carver watched from the porch. Hat in hand, lines of sleeplessness carved deep around his eyes. He didn't speak. There wasn't much left to say. The woman stepped forward, the hawk feather still tied in her hair. She reached into the small pouch at her waist and drew out two things, a black shard of obsidian and a single white feather. She placed them in Luke's palm. Her fingers were cool, steady, sacred somehow. "When the wind comes from the west," she said, her voice calm and musical, "it carries thanks." Luke stared at the objects resting in his hand, sharp and soft, dark and light. Opposites, like everything that had happened between them. He wanted to answer, but his throat closed up. The woman gave a slow nod. Then she turned, helped her youngest onto the saddle, and climbed onto her own horse. The white hawk swooped down from the ridge, landing on her arm with a quiet cry. Luke's boots scuffed the porch as he stepped forward. "Take care of them," he said. She looked back once, eyes unreadable. "You already did." Then they rode toward the canyon, silhouettes swallowed by the morning glare. For a while, the only sound was the soft rhythm of hooves on stone and the distant echo of the hawk calling overhead. Cole came up beside Luke, wiping sleep from his eyes. He watched the riders fade into the horizon, then exhaled through his nose. "You think they'll ever come back?" Luke didn't turn. He kept watching that empty stretch of land where the family had disappeared. "They already did," he said. Cole nodded slowly, not understanding. Not yet. The ranch was quiet now. The storm that once haunted it had burned itself out, but in that silence, something new lived. Not peace exactly, but a kind of balance. Luke walked to the porch rail where the toy horse still sat. Its wooden surface was cracked and darkened by time, the marks of the old fire still visible. Next to it, the hawk feather stirred gently in the morning wind. He set the obsidian shard beside them. It caught the light like frozen smoke. For a moment, he saw everything reflected there. His son, his mistakes, the desert that had nearly taken him. He breathed in, deep and slow. Out there, the canyon walls shimmered. The hawk circled once, high and distant, its cry carrying across the land like a blessing or a warning. Maybe both. Luke leaned against the post, hand closing around the feather. He thought of the boys' faces, the woman's steady eyes, the word she'd left him with, thanks. He'd spent years believing mercy was weakness. That out here a man survived by keeping his heart hard as the land. But now, watching the sun climb and the sky open, he felt something else. Mercy wasn't weakness. It was the one thing the desert couldn't kill. The wind shifted, brushing his face, warm, western, full of memory. He could almost hear voices in it, his wife's laughter, a child's small cry, the echo of that first desperate call in the canyon. Cole went back inside. Luke stayed where he was. The light grew brighter. The feather trembled, lifted, and drifted free, caught by the same wind the woman spoke of. It rose slowly, spinning upward until it vanished into the wide, white sky. Luke smiled. "Tired, honest, out here. Mercy doesn't end a story. It begins one." And as the hawk's distant cry faded into the sun, the land remembered.